Alright, so in this lesson, I'm going to be talking about vertical scaling methods for Facebook ads. In this module, I'm going to be showing you my ads manager for Flex Posture quite a bit, and you're going to see that there's a lot of different budgets on my ad sets, and I wanted to clarify how I vertically scale my ad sets, just so that you guys understand for the rest of the videos inside of this module. Because there's no clear blueprint on how you want to scale ad sets vertically. There's different ways that you can do it, and a lot of people have different methods, and so I want to explain the thought process that I go through when I vertically scale my audiences. So first off, when should you vertically scale, and what does vertically scaling even, what does that even mean? So horizontal scaling is when you test a lot of different audiences without increasing the budget of a single audience too much. Vertical scaling is when you go all in on one audience, and so you increase the budget for one audience. And so when do you want to vertically scale? Well, you want to vertically scale if you've identified a profitable audience and you want to get the most out of it. And so by that, I mean that, there's an audience that you've been targeting at a lower budget for a few days and you're getting consistent results, and now you have enough data and you've made the decision that this is a good audience to target. That's when you should vertically scale and start increasing the budget. And that's that's really how you scale with Facebook ads, is you start vertically scaling your profitable audiences. And so I'd recommend audiences of at least a million people or more to scale vertically. Smaller than that, you're going to have a hard time scaling a lot. As you start scaling, the cost per result is going to go up quite a lot unless you have a larger audience. And so one thing that you can do is, if your audience is smaller than 1 million, you can group the audiences by cost per purchase. And this is something that I talked about in the scaling by grouping video. And so that's what you can do here. You can scale by grouping to vertically scale, right? Because you want to have larger audiences when you scale vertically. Now, another thing I put here is that I'd recommend getting at least 10 results from an audience before scaling vertically. So if you're optimizing for purchases, you're trying to get purchases, I would recommend getting at least 10 purchases before determining that this is a good audience, right? So like, for example, if you're running at $10 a day and your cost per purchase is $10, then you will need to wait at least 10 days, and then over those 10 days you will need to be profitable and everything looks good, and then you can scale vertically. Otherwise, if you scale an audience vertically just because you got 1 or 2 sales, that's not enough. That's not enough data. It's not reliable. And so once you scale vertically, there's a good chance that you're just going to waste money, because that wasn't really a good audience. You just got lucky with that audience that specific day. And so when you increase the budget, it all averages out, and then you don't get the same results. And so I would recommend at least getting 10 results, and preferably more. And this is partly, this is part of the reason why I personally start with larger budgets. I usually start with $50 ad sets. It's just so that you can get results faster and you can get reliable data and make reliable decisions. And so yeah, I would recommend at least 10 results, preferably more than that, but 10 I would say is the bare minimum. So now I'm going to talk about the different methods of scaling vertically. So the first one is just increasing the budget without duplicating, just editing the budget. Now, this works well if you want to scale slow and steadily and you're patient. So you're not trying to blow up your ad account super aggressively. You just want to scale slow and steadily. What you can do is you can just increase the budget of your ad sets 20 to 30%, depending on how aggressive you want to be, every 2 days. Now, you could even go as high as like 40%, but it's better to be conservative, in my opinion, with the strategy. So you can increase the budget 20 to 30% every 2 days, as long as the audience is profitable. And this will give you slow and steady scaling, really gradual scaling. This is a great way to do it. And when you're doing this, you don't want to play with the budget too often. Like, if you increase the budget and then the next day the performance drops a bit, don't panic, just let it run for another day, and then based on those 2 days, you can make a decision. And when you're looking at the data, look at least at 3 days of data when you're making these decisions, so that you don't make decisions based on just like 1 day. Look at least at a few days, so that you can actually get a good picture of what results that ad set is bringing you, right? Because some days ad sets are going to perform well, some days they're going to perform bad, and so what you're really looking for is the average of the performance over a few days. So usually I'll look at the last 3-4 days, sometimes even 5 days, when I decide when I'm looking to kill ad sets and make decisions about which ad sets to scale. And so this strategy of just increasing the budget slow and steadily is in my opinion, it works the best for small audiences. So if you have small lookalike audiences, of like 100,000 people, or audiences like interests of like 300,000, 500,000 people, increasing the budget slow and steadily can work well. And you can figure out the max budget that you can vertically scale to gradually. You don't just duplicate the higher budgets. You can just gradually keep scaling it until you see the performance start declining, and then that's where you can leave the budget. So that's one way to do it. Now, the other way is duplication. Now, duplication is when you want to scale more aggressively. And so, if you're running an ad at like $5 a day, and then you want to quickly increase the budget to $20 a day or $50 a day, that's when you duplicate. And so what I'll typically do is I'll start at $50 and then I'll duplicate right away to $200 if it's profitable, based on, I need to get at least 10 results, like I said before, and at least 10 results. And usually I'll wait for more than 10 results. So, I'll make sure that it's a good audience and then I'll duplicate it. So I'll start at 50, then I'll go to 200, and then I'll go to 500 with manual bidding. Now, depending on your budget, you can change the strategy. So you could go, from $5 to 20 to 50. The daily budget that you start out with really doesn't matter. The only difference is how many results you're going to get. So depending on your budget, you can make the strategy your own. And you can keep the original ad sets running if the audience is big. Otherwise, you can pause the original ad set to avoid overlap. And so, if you're running at high budgets and the audience is smaller than like 1 million people, then you would probably want to turn off the original ad set to avoid overlap. But if you have an audience of like 100 million people or 50 million people, realistically, you can duplicate a lot and you're not going to get audience overlap because the audience is so big. And so that's what you can do with duplicating. And it's really for scaling aggressively. Like I said, if you want to be, conservative and scale slow and steadily, then I would just recommend increasing budgets 20 to 30% every 2 days. But if you want to scale aggressively and you want to collect data fast and you know that the product that you're trying to scale is a winner, and you can duplicate. And that's what I was doing with Flex Posture. I was duplicating mainly. I wasn't doing much increasing budgets. But with some of the new projects that I'm working on with my new brand, I'm doing a little bit more increasing when I'm trying to get slow and steady growth. So you really have to decide what you're trying to achieve here. So just another important detail about the duplication scaling method. So sometimes when your audiences will be profitable at an X budget, but not at Y. So for example, if you're testing audiences at $50 and you have an audience that's super profitable at $50 budget, but then when you try to duplicate it to 200, it stops working. It stopped being profitable. In that case, just leave it at X. So, with that example, just leave the audience at $50. And one thing you can do is you can just duplicate that audience a bunch of times and leave it at $50. And so you can scale horizontally that way instead of trying to scale vertically. Because sometimes, it just won't work if the budget's too high and you won't be able to vertically scale the ad set. So, if it's not working, then just don't force it and just scale horizontally instead. Now, one tip is the bigger the audience, the more you'll be able to scale one ad set vertically. So if you have, an audience with like a few million people, you should be able to scale to, at least 500 a day or more in budget. And so one thing that you can do to achieve these bigger audiences is you can scale by grouping. And I talked about this in the last video. But, if you're trying to scale to like the United States, for example, what you could do is you could take 3 or 4 lookalike audiences with a similar cost per purchase and then stack them into one ad set, which will give you a large audience. And then you can increase the budget quite significantly and see if that works. And so that's one good tip. Now, the last thing I want to talk about in this presentation is manual bidding. So manual bidding is great for large budgets and aggressive scaling. So when you really want to scale aggressively, so usually I'll recommend having a budget of at least $500 a day or more to use manual bidding. Now, in the Flex Posture case study, I was using manual bidding with budgets of $200 a day. And I don't do this anymore because I've realized that it really doesn't make a difference. So what you need to understand about manual bidding is that it's lowest cost with a bid cap. So it's not like a target cost. Whatever price you're putting as a bid cap, Facebook's not gonna try to get you that cost. It's the same bidding strategy as if you don't put a bid cap. So everything's gonna be the same. The only difference is that if you have a really large budget and Facebook is trying to spend it, very quickly because if you have a budget of $1,000 a day, Facebook is gonna need to spend a lot of your budget every hour. And so it's going to start bidding really aggressively, more aggressively than it would bid if it were just at a smaller budget. And so that's where the bid cap comes in. You can say, hey, I want you to bid, I want you to spend a lot of money, so I'm going to give you a high budget, but don't bid too aggressively to spend the budget. So, if you can only spend $500 out of my $1,000 budget, that's okay, because I don't want you to bid higher than this. And that's how the bid cap works. And so when you have like a $200 budget, a $200 daily budget, Facebook doesn't really need a bid cap. You can just do lowest cost and it probably won't even go higher than your bid. And so you can use a bid cap, and usually the only time that it's useful if you're using a bid cap with lower budgets is if you're really trying to squeeze the lowest cost per purchase possible. So if you put a really low bid cap, and Facebook is just not going to spend a lot on that audience, but sometimes you'll be able to get a few sales. And so that's one way you can do it as well. But what I like doing is starting manual bidding at $500 budget and then increasing the budget 20 to 30% every 2 days, just increasing, not duplicating. And that's what I'll do. And I'll start the bid cap higher than my cost per purchase. So let's say my cost per purchase is $10. I'll start it at $20 to $30, maybe in the middle, so like 25, and then I'll start lowering it as much as possible without slowing down the delivery. So at the start, when you put it 2 to 3 times higher, Facebook should be able to spend your budget quite fast. It'll just be able to spend and bid quite high on your audiences. And so what you want to do is you want to gradually lower the bid cap as much as possible without seeing slowing down in the delivery. So if you start, as you start lowering the bid cap, Facebook will spend your budget slower. And so you want to keep lowering it as much as possible without, Facebook completely stopping the delivery and, almost not spending on your ad set anymore. And so this takes practice, but basically you want to find the sweet spot where, you have the lowest bid cap possible with Facebook still spending all of your budget. So that's what manual bidding is all about. And like I said, it's really not that necessary with a $200 daily budget. I would recommend at least having a $500 daily budget to use manual bidding. Now, the last thing is that you need to note that changing the bid cap doesn't affect the optimization. And so that's why you can just play around and keep lowering it. You can change the bid cap all the time. It won't affect the optimization. It'll just affect, the bid cap when Facebook is bidding on that audience. So that's it for this quick presentation. Now, I just want to show you some examples from Flex Posture, and then that'll be it. So for Flex Posture, I was mainly duplicating. So if I go to this is the lifetime spent, and if I go to the amount spent, I selected the 2 cold traffic campaigns here to show you what I was spending the most on. And if I go to amount spent, you'll see that most of these ad sets were at a $200 daily budget. So you can see that most of these are $200 daily budget, and that's the point at which these ads were performing the best. A lot of them I tried to scale to like 500. So for example, this one I duplicated to 500, and you can see, well, this one actually did quite well. 1.8 was still profitable, so that was okay, and so I left it running. But in a lot of the cases, I would try to duplicate higher than $200 a day, and it would stop working well. Like this one, I duplicated this one to 750, and as you can see, it took quite a hit, and so I had to turn that off. And so, most of these were running at $200 a day, because at $500 a day, I would start seeing a significant decline in the performance. Some of them you can see are at like 240, 260. And so those are ad sets that I scaled by increasing the budget by 20 to 30%. And so like I said, it really depends on the situation, which scaling method you're going to use. And to be honest, ad accounts kind of like behave differently to different scaling methods as well. And so it's kind of like a guessing game. You just have to test what works for you. And based on the situation, based on how aggressive you're trying to scale. So aggressive scaling, I would duplicate. Slow and steady scaling, I would just increase the budget. And as you can see, there's all different types of budgets. Like some of them are 200, some of them are 500, 250, 500. You can see this one at 500. Again, the performance declined quite significantly, right? So that's the main thing that I was trying to show you with, by taking you into the ads manager quickly, is just to show you that I have all these different budgets, and most of them were just at $200, because that's the point at which I was able to scale them without seeing a decline in my return on ad spend. So that's it for this quick lesson. I hope it was helpful, and I'll see you in the next one.